and welcome to the August edition of The Lead Out. I'm Alex Ballinger and alongside me is Simon Richardson. This is going to be our preview of the final Grand Tour of the year, the Vuelta a España. But before we look at the race, let's look at the headlines from the last month. The Tour de France 2019 was won by Team Ineos rider Egan Bernal, the first Colombian to win the Tour and the youngest rider since 1904. Mitchelton Scott's Annemiek van Vleuten secured victory in the Giro Rosa, the longest race on the women's calendar, winning by a staggering 3:45 over her rival Anna van der Breggen. Marianne Vos emerged victorious in Po after a thrilling edition of La Course by the Tour de France. Remco Evenepoel was crowned time trial champion at the European Road Championships in Alkmaar in the Netherlands. The 19-year-old is riding his first season at World Tour level and had already won the Clásico San Sebastian the week before. All of the racing this month was of course overshadowed by the tragic death of Björk Lambrecht. The 22-year-old Lotto Soudal rider suffered a fatal crash on stage 3 of the Tour of Poland and died in hospital. So before we look in depth at the Vuelta course and all of the contenders, Simon, what do you think we should be looking out for just before the race?
Well, I think it's time for the rerun of Movistar versus Team Jumbo-Visma. Two strong teams at the Tour de France. Movistar strong at the Giro as well. They're strong at every Grand Tour. But they, although the teams are still provisional at the moment, they're both looking like they're turning up with stacked teams. Ineos not so much. They've got a younger team to come, so they won't be as dominant as they were at the Tour. But I think that's really exciting. You've also got the emergence of some young Grand Tour riders, young climbers, who are probably going to be the next generation of Grand Tour winners. So I think they're the two things I'm looking forward to.
Some exciting contenders for the Brits as well, isn't there? We've got Theo Geoghegan-Hart, who'll be riding second Grand Tour of the year after crashing out of the Giro, and Hugh Carthy as well, who should be strong. He had a really strong Giro as well, didn't he?
Yeah, Carthy had a great Giro, one of the stars of the race really. And Geoghegan-Hart and maybe James Knox as well for De Koning. He's on their long list. He had to pull out of the Giro after crash, injuring his leg as well. Was feeling good apart from the injury he sustained. So really exciting to see those two young Brits hopefully completing their first Grand Tour, not their debut, but maybe looking to make it to the end in Madrid.
So those are the things that we're looking forward to at the Vuelta. Here are some key stats from the race. The race covers the usual 21 stages over 3,272 kilometres. The Grand Depart this year is in Salinas de Torrevieja in the Costa Blanca, opening with a team time trial at 13.4 kilometres long, so that could be decisive, quite a short team time trial there. There's an individual time trial on stage 10, 36.2 kilometres. There'll be 8 uphill finishes in this year's race, 5 of which are new to the race, so the Vuelta continues its reputation of trying to mix things up. The race includes stages in Valencia, Barcelona, the Basque Country, and also includes detours into Andorra and France before finishing with the processional sprint stage in Madrid. Right, so let's get stuck in looking at the stages. So Simon, stage 1, team time trial. It seems to be growing in popularity, the team time trial, in recent years in Grand Tours, doesn't it?
Well, especially for the Vuelta, this is the 8th time they've started the race with a team time trial in the last 9 years, so quite a common format for them. And I guess all eyes will be once again on Jumbo-Visma, who won the early team time trial in the Tour de France in very, very impressive form. I think they'll look to put one of their GC riders in a good position. It's pan flat, so it should be very fast, no elevation whatsoever. So it's time to get the big strong riders out and get that line strung out and see what you can do.
This could also be a disaster very early on for some teams. As you can see in the Tour this year, that team time trials can really split the field early on, can't they? And I'm sure there'll be some teams that will be pretty nervous about losing their GC hopes, even over a 13-kilometre course before they've even started, really. Yeah,
it does depend how technical the route is. Not always easy to know with a Vuelta. You sometimes find things out when you actually arrive. The same for the teams. They find things that they're not always expecting. But yeah, the teams will have to be on their game not to lose time on that first day, because that's if you start stage 2 already 30 seconds down, that's a big handicap.
So then moving on into the first week, we have the first summit finish on stage 5. It's going up to almost 2,000 metres at the Observatorio Astrofisico de Havalambra. It looks like a tough day early in the first week.
Yeah, I mean, that first week is really quite lumpy. That's the first summit finish, but the other days there's nothing pan flat for the sprinters. Although maybe a sprinter stage, but they've still got to get over some hills to get to that finish line. But yeah, stage 5 is the first big climb, and you'd expect a big sort out there.
Riders are going to have to be sort of on their toes in the early part of the stage as well, aren't they? Because it is a summit finish, but then also it doesn't start easily. The climbing goes up pretty much straight away, and then we've got 2 categorised climbs on the way with a lot of uncategorised punchy climbs as well. So it's going to be really tough to control the race to that final climb as well, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah. This is a big day. Certainly the first one, they'll all be worried about the GC contenders. It climbs up to a plateau, and then it dips and climbs all the way to that last climb. So a tough day, and the GC riders will have to sort of stay safe, stay out of the wind, and hold their energy back for that climb. So this is a stage not to miss.
So we then have 2 more uphill finishes on stages 7 and 8. And then on to stage 9, where we have the first beyond categorization climb, start in Andorra as well. So the return to the Andorran mountains, it looks like it's going to be horrible.
Yeah, this is a big day. Again, climbing from the start, big climb in the middle, and then a summit finish at the end, and they are definitely in the mountains. So end of the first week, Sunday, September 1st, another stage not to miss. And I think this is where you'll see, well, you will definitely see Movistar, Jumbo-Visma, maybe Ineos set out to ride for their GC rider. You might have had a sort of second string rider get into the leader's jersey earlier in the week. This is where the riders who are going for the GC will come to the fore. They'll have to. That
beyond categorization climb is a little bit too far from the finish, potentially for the winning move to come from there as well, do you think? But it will always define the day of racing, won't it? When riders have got a massive climb like that in the middle of the day, they will be looking to it and really sort of nervous and trying to just stay out of trouble up until that point, aren't they?
Yeah, I think it depends on whether or not any teams want to take it on early and really disrupt it, like Movistar did at the Tour this year. Didn't really work out for them, but just that disruptive nature, it put everyone under pressure, because you saw a lot of times during the Tour, by the time they got to the last climb, apart from perhaps Ineos with Thomas and Bernal, no one had any help. And that's when the racing gets interesting. So if a team takes it on early and sheds all the climbing domestiques from the GC favourites, that's when you have a really interesting final climb.
What I really like about this final climb as well is that it isn't sort of a pure gradient all the way up to the top. It seems to come in steps, a second category, 2 second category steps, and then a first category step. And that will surely sort of draw out more attacks as well, won't it? Because when the climb doesn't look as difficult on paper, that can really sort of encourage people to be a little bit more brave, not worry about getting dropped quite so much, because they think, well, I can attack here, then we've got a plateau, see what happens then maybe go again if you've got the legs.
Depending on the rider, I think some riders may think there's no point in attacking before that plateau, because if there's a group behind me, they'll work together and just pull me back, because they can go faster on that plateau. But for then another rider who's perhaps not one of the leaders might think, well, actually, they might just let me go there, waiting for the last steep ramp, and actually I'm not the best climber, but I can push on that plateau, hold a gap, and keep going on the last bit. So I think it depends on the rider who's there on that last climb. But it's certainly interesting. It doesn't suit a pure climber, so it might just draw a few more riders into the race that we're not expecting to see, which would be fun.
First time that the race goes above 2,000 metres as well, which is always a decisive point in the race, isn't it? It always really sort of, you start to separate out the riders who physiologically can deal with altitude and those who tend to struggle. And obviously now we're seeing more and more riders come from high altitude areas, like Colombia, like we saw with Bernal at the Tour.
Yeah, it was a deciding factor at the Tour, wasn't it, at the time at altitude. So, it can start to bite from as early as 1,500 metres for some people, and, it changes all the time. But certainly above 1,800 metres, and you can start to feel the effects of slightly less oxygen. But yeah, I mean, the South American riders have come to the fore, with Carapaz and Bernal winning the first 2 Grand Tours of the year. So I'm sure they'll be all guns blazing, especially Nairo Quintana, who's it's been a while since he's won a Grand Tour. He'll be looking to set that right. I think this will be his first opportunity. As we saw at the Tour, he takes a while to come into his climbing legs, so I wouldn't expect to see him on that first climb on the Wednesday, but by the time we get here on the Sunday, I think Quintana will be nicely warmed up and maybe looking to make a move.
Stage 9 is only 94 kilometres long as well, so this really could cause the race to explode.
Yeah, it'll go early. The brake will go on that first climb, and it'll have to be controlled. And the GC riders, there'll be someone who will probably take the opportunity or take the chance to make up some time, because they know there's not too much fatigue going to be built up today. You can just go for it, and if it goes wrong, you won't lose too much time.
And then moving on to stage 10, we have the individual time trial, which comes after the first rest day. This is finishing in Po, which is the second time we've been to Po this year, second time trial in Po this year as well. So a little bit different in the Vuelta, because we are looking at more of a flat course than we had in the Tour. The Tour was really lumpy, different kind of riders thrived there, didn't they? So we really should see the sort of powerful riders on the flat.
It's a pure power time trial. Very interesting that it comes after the first rest day. Some riders often, depending on what they do on their rest day, they can struggle to transition into an effort like that. Their legs just aren't ready for it. So getting your rest day right and getting your preparation right is key for the GC riders.
It can cause absolute havoc, can't it, with riders not knowing how they're going to come out of the rest day anyway. So even a sort of mountain stage can be quite tough, can't it, coming out of the rest day. So a time trial, which a lot of riders will be dreading anyway, won't they, that could really cause some sort of unexpected results, couldn't it? And we could see some people losing
and
time.
after quite a lot of climbing building up to that rest day as well, they'd have got their climbing legs in, riding smaller gears on the tops, and now they've suddenly got to get in on a TT bike and start pushing bigger gears. So that transition is, it's crucial. We've got to get that right.
Then we have the final day for the general classification battle, stage 20, from Arenas to San Pedro to Plataforma de Gredos, 189 kilometres. Not what you'd expect from a final mountain stage.
No, not really. I mean, it climbs from the start and then it's lumpy all the way, big mountain just before the end, and then it's a few little lumps and bumps to the end. So the last big climb of the Vuelta looks just to be a launch pad rather than the finish line. If someone does launch on there, they've got it's going to be a great chase all the way to the finish because it's up and down. So it's a nicely designed stage that it looks really good. So depending on whether or not the leader at that stage is looking weakened or has a team that's looked weakened, we could have a final stage ambush, perfect for a team like Movistar to launch something against a rival. That's sort of terrain where they really excel.
And in stage 21, we have the processional flat stage in Madrid. It's a good opportunity to talk about the sprinters that are going to be at this race. It's quite a strong field, actually, isn't it? There's a few big names there.
Sam Bennett, hopefully, for Boa, one of the most prolific sprinters this year, so hopefully gets his chance to get a few more grand stage wins under his belt. Dimension data have named Mark Cavendish, so we shall see. It'll be very interesting to see if he does ride, which we're expecting him to, I think, how he gets on after being dropped from the Tour de France. And Degenkolb returning, and then hopefully Gaviria as well, who's been really quiet all year.
Yeah, knee injury in the Giro that he suffered, sort of took a stage of the Giro, didn't he? And then it just seemed to be sort of a minor knee injury that was causing him some complaints and causing him some hassle. And it didn't seem like it'd be a problem because he sort of pulled out of the Giro with the intention of riding the Tour, didn't he? But then obviously things were worse than originally expected, and then he had to skip the Tour as well, which he would be pretty disappointed about, won't he? Seeing as he's been on really strong form for the last few seasons.
Yeah, I mean, the last couple of years, he was, looking like he's going to emerge to be the sprinter to beat, and hasn't been able to show that this year. So it'd be good to see him back to his sort of 2018 levels, and I think if he can get back to that, I think he'll be the strongest sprinter in the race, and he's got the physique where he can get over those lumps and bumps. They can all get over them, but he can probably get over them in slightly better shape and therefore have a bit more when it comes to the final sprint.
First Vuelta for him as well, so it could be the chance to complete the Grand Tour set because he's already got Tour and Giro wins, so he'll be extra motivated, I think, compared to the other guys. Jakobsen as well for De Koning Quick-Step is expected to be there. Is he one of the young, sort of the next wave of sprinters, isn't he, that Quick-Step are trying to bring up? Him and Alvaro Hodge are their two sort of younger guys that they're really trying to get to the tier of sort of, Viviani and Gaviria, who have been through that Quick-Step system. He's had some good results this year as well, and could be a factor. Yeah,
I mean, when De Koning Quick-Step are at a race, they are almost guaranteed to win stages. It's in their DNA, isn't it? Just their tactics, the experience in the team car behind them, the sort of the desire the team have, that they can't turn up to a race and not contest because they know their teammates have been doing it all year. So yeah, it'd be a nice chance to see those younger sprinters, and like the younger GC riders who we're looking at in some of those team lineups, it'd be nice to see some of the younger sprinters coming through as well.
I think what's going to be decisive from the Vuelta route for the sprinters as well is that there's not really any sprint opportunities in the first week, and they don't come until the sort of second half of the race. So fitness is going to be such a key part for the sprinters here, isn't it? It's going to be the guy that can survive the first week of a really tough Grand Tour that is then able to, sprint at his best. Then it takes the wins.
Yeah, I think that's, if anything, that's what will stop the younger sprinters from showing through, because they won't be able to deal with the fatigue as well as the more experienced riders. So they'll have probably less in the tank when it comes to week 2 and into week 3 if they're still there.
So then, if we move on to the general classification battle, I think it really seems like this is going to be a race that's defined by the absences, because there are some notable riders that are missing from this that probably would be the favourites if they were riding as planned. So Chris Froome still out injured, Geraint Thomas riding the Deutschland Tour instead, which is potentially the biggest surprise, I suppose. It would have been a good opportunity for him to try his luck in a different Grand Tour. Yeah, it really seems like these are going to be the riders that we're talking about, even though they're not there.
Yeah, the Tour really shapes who rides the Vuelta. We watched the Tour this year, and you usually see GC riders crashing out, pulling out, whatever, from quite early on. But there was that actually didn't happen this year. We only really had Jakob Fuglsang pull out through injury after crashing. Everyone else pretty much made it all the way through to Paris. So often the joke is someone crashes out in the first week of the Tour, they're instantly made the favourite for that year's Vuelta, and that just didn't happen. So with a really good Tour de France field, making it all the way to Paris, those riders won't feel like they need to ride a Grand Tour. So the riders we've got left, Kruijswijk is backing up by the looks of it for Jumbo-Visma. and then he's potentially got teammate Roglic coming back after a disappointing Giro, and then you have of course the strong Spanish riders who always want to ride and perform at their home race. You've got Valverde and the South American riders who do often favour the Vuelta.
I think one of the most exciting riders that is starting has got to be Richard Carapaz. So unexpected winner of the Giro, eventually a bit of a surprise to everyone, I'd imagine, but this could be a really good opportunity to see if he can back it up and see if we really do have a next Grand Tour star in the wings. Yeah,
it definitely is. Not that his Giro win was a fluke, but we want to see, like you say, how he backs that up, and it will be interesting to see how Movistar support him, because we are expecting him to leave at the end of the year. So I doubt he'll be there as a leader. He'll be there on team duties. So whether or not he's fully committed to that is something else. But yeah, we definitely want to see more of him, because he came to prominence late in the Giro, and all of a sudden he'd won it, and we hadn't really had a chance to really look at him or think about him as a GC rider or contender until late in the race. So he will go into the Vuelta with that focus very much on him. So to see how he handles that will be really interesting.
We have another former winner in the race as well, in the shape of Fabio Aru, who has had a bit of a nightmare the last few years, hasn't he? He's really struggled for form, and then had surgery for a condition in his leg, I think, which he thinks seems to have solved the problem to an extent. And he was better in the Tour this year, wasn't he? We did see him sort of coming back to something like his best. I mean, obviously not his best, but
he showed some glimpses. But it's been a while now since he's been a genuine contender for a Grand Tour. So maybe we'll see him continue to sort of rise up and maybe push for a top 10. I think that could be within him in Spain, but I don't think he'll be threatening Movistar or Jumbo-Visma just yet.
And then what about Rigoberto Urán as well, who's sort of one of those riders that is always there or thereabouts in any GC race. He's always in the top 10. He's had sort of really strong results in the past, hasn't he? He's had podium second places in Grand Tours, but he's never really looked that close in recent years to getting the win. Do you think this could be the one?
Yeah, I think he's a good outside bet, actually. I mean, we saw him had a really good Tour de France last year. And then we were expecting more of him this year, and it didn't. While it wasn't a disaster, it wasn't what we were expecting. So I think he could be the one to throw a bit of a surprise for EF. Not a particularly strong team around him, although Van Garderen potentially, and Hugh Carthy, if he can do what he did at the Giro, he's a fantastic teammate. But I think Urán is a really good outside bet this year, I think.
I think what's also quite exciting from Quick-Step, they obviously don't come into these races with any sort of general classification ambitions, really, nothing. It's not what they're targeting, is it? But on their provisional list, we have James Knox, who is expected to return for a second Grand Tour, like you said earlier, crashed out of the Giro. He will pretty much, looking at the team, if the provisional team is the team that they field, he'll be pretty much given free rein, won't he, to ride for the GC?
It'd be nice to think so. I mean, what's interesting with those climbs early on in the race, if he can have a good first week and show himself up there, then he might get their support and for the remainder of the race, or at least until he starts to fade away. So that'll be really interesting, because what a team to have behind you. Although whether or not they want to go for stage wins rather than back someone up, it remains to be seen.
And then looking at Mitchelton Scott as well, they have the reigning champion in their roster, but potentially not in their squad from what we understand. They haven't officially announced the team as we speak, but the understanding is that neither reigning champion Simon nor Adam Yates are expected to be there.
Despite being reigning champion, I'd be amazed if Simon Yates was there and therefore riding 3 Grand Tours in a year. I just can't believe he'd do that. I think it's not necessarily for someone of his age.
We should talk about Team Ineos as well. This is surprising for them. Well, I say surprising for them. Normally they field such formidable Grand Tour teams, but in the last 2 Vueltas they really haven't had that. Mikhail Kwiatkowski last year was their leader. They basically run out of their Grand Tour favourites, haven't they, for the year? Same again this year, really. It doesn't look like they've got any of their really, really strong 3-week races that are going to be there. Yeah,
I think they've got a strong team this year. They've got Castro Viejo, Diego Rosa, Elizondo, De La Cruz, Kirienka listed on their provisional list. So there's some strong riders there, but there's no standout rider who you think will be on the podium. And after first, second at the Tour de France, maybe that's not too much of a surprise. But having gone from challenging for all Grand Tours, they now seem to just be stepping back.
Right then, let's do the awful bit where we go on the record. We say who we think is going to win the race. I don't like this bit because it always ends up coming back to bite you. So if we twist your arm, Simon, who do you think is going to win the Vuelta?
Well, if our start list is the provisional start list is correct, I'd probably go with Jumbo-Visma. I think they did so well at the Tour and got so close. I think they'll be gunning for a Grand Tour win. So if they're riding, I'd go with either Kruijswijk or Roglic. I think Roglic will want to make amends for for the Giro. You know, he started so strong in such great form, and then just faded away. And I think everyone probably expected a bit more from him, and I think he'll really want to make amends for that. I'll go Roglic.
So I'm going to go with Astana, Miguel Angel Lopez.
Yeah.
They've had a sort of mixed year this year, haven't they? They've looked at a few points like they were one of the top 3 strongest teams in all stage races, pretty much, haven't they? Fuglsang won the Dauphiné and then looked really good in the Tour. Didn't quite live up to the expectation, did he? Wasn't quite the sort of overall favourite that we were expecting, but was still in the top 10 when he crashed out. But I think Lopez, after his performance in the Giro, he would have been disappointed by that, I think, and he had his share of controversy as well, the video emerging of him attacking a fan, and I think he's going to be really keen to redeem himself from the year that he's had so far. And I think Astana, the same. Astana will be trying to do the same. They always take a strong team to Grand Tours, and I think with the Izagirre brothers there as well, and Luis Leon Sanchez as support riders, I think that Lopez is probably going to contend for the podium, and I think he's my pick for the win. So those are our predictions. Let us know who you think is going to win the Vuelta in the comments below. Right, that wraps up our Vuelta preview, so don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And you can also get the magazine every Thursday. It's out in the UK in all good newsagents and supermarkets. The August 22nd issue is our Vuelta preview. You can also get the magazine digitally on any device.
And we will also be covering the race on cyclingweekly.com as well, so more information there. Thank you very much for watching. We really hope you enjoyed the Vuelta, and we'll be back with another episode of The Lead Out in September for the Tour of Britain.